So you want the lowdown on coal, huh? Is it really as bad for the planet as everyone says?
Oh, it's definitely a hot topic.
You guys sent us a ton of stuff on this, even some excerpts from a podcast script called Is Coal Energy Bad for Earth? We're going to try to break it all down for you, help you separate fact from fiction so you can form your own opinion.
Sounds good.
All right, so let's jump right in. What's the big deal with coal anyway?
Well, even though there's this big push for renewables, coal still generates a huge chunk of the world's electricity, over a third, actually.
Wow, that's way more than I would have guessed.
Yeah, it's a bit surprising.
So it seems like coal's got a bigger impact than a lot of people realize. But before we get into all that, how does coal actually get from the ground to powering our homes?
It all starts with extraction, and there are two main ways to get it: surface mining and underground mining.
I can imagine both of those have some downsides for the environment. What are the pros and cons of each?
Well, surface mining, where they remove huge amounts of earth to get to the coal seams, that can really change the landscape. Like, mountaintop removal mining in Appalachia.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
They literally blast away entire mountaintops, and that really messes with the ecosystems and can pollute the water. Underground mining, it doesn't look as bad, but it can cause the ground to sink, above the mine. And both methods kick up a lot of coal dust and create runoff that can pollute water sources.
So even before you burn the coal, there are environmental costs.
Definitely.
But burning it, that's where things get really controversial, right? With the carbon footprint and all that.
Absolutely. Coal's carbon footprint is massive. It produces way more CO2 per unit of electricity than natural gas. And forget about comparing it to renewables. There's no comparison. It's responsible for a whopping 40% of global energy-related CO2 emissions.
40%, that's a big slice of the pie.
It is.
So basically, by relying on coal, we're contributing to climate change big time.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's not just the CO2, is it?
No, it's not. Burning coal releases a bunch of other pollutants too, like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and particulate matter.
And those cause?
All sorts of problems.
Yeah.
Smog, acid rain, breathing problems. The World Health Organization thinks that millions of people die prematurely every year because of air pollution from burning coal.
Millions. That's just, I don't even know what to say to that. It's a scary thought.
It is. And then there's another issue that people don't talk about as much: methane emissions.
From coal.
Yeah, coal mining itself releases methane, and that's an even more potent greenhouse gas than CO2.
So coal is hitting us with a double whammy of greenhouse gases.
That's right.
And that's not even considering all the effects of coal mining on ecosystems beyond air and water pollution.
Yeah, the damage goes even further. Coal mining threatens all kinds of habitats, even, believe it or not, the Amazon rainforest.
Seriously.
Yeah, in Kalimantan, Indonesia, for example. Coal mining has caused deforestation and forced wildlife out of their homes. And then there's the coal ash, the stuff left over after you burn coal.
Oh.
If it's not disposed of properly, it contaminates rivers and water supplies. Remember that Dan River spill in North Carolina?
Oh, yeah, where they released tons of coal ash into the water.
Exactly, and that ash was full of arsenic, mercury, and lead.
Scary stuff.
And the damage from abandoned coal mines can be just as bad. They often leak acidic water loaded with heavy metals. It's called acid mine drainage. It's caused lasting ecological damage in places like the Appalachians in the U.S. and South Wales in the U.K.
So coal mining leaves a lot of destruction in its wake. But it can't be all bad, right? I mean, there must be economic reasons why coal is still such a big energy source.
Of course, there are economic factors at play. Coal is often cheaper than other energy sources, and it's readily available in many parts of the world. This is particularly true in developing nations like India, where they need affordable energy to grow their economy.
So it makes sense why they would stick with coal, especially if they're trying to lift people out of poverty. But are those cost savings really worth it when we think about all the damage to the environment and people's health?
That's the big question, isn't it? Yeah. A Harvard study in 2020 estimated that the global health costs of using coal are over $2 trillion every year.
Wow, $2 trillion.
Yeah.
So maybe coal isn't as cheap as we think when you factor in all those hidden costs.
Exactly.
Healthcare, environmental damage, lost productivity. It's like trying to sweep a giant mess under the rug.
Right. And we haven't even talked about the people who work in the coal industry. It provides jobs, sure, but those jobs are often dangerous and come with long-term health risks. Look at Imaloleni in South Africa. Their economy depends on coal mining, but the town suffers from terrible pollution and a lot of health problems.
It sounds like a real dilemma, trying to balance the need for economic development with the need to protect the environment and people's health.
It's a tough one.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, and it seems like there's a lot to be concerned about when it comes to coal. But is there any hope? Are there any solutions out there? Or are we just stuck?
We'll get into potential solutions in the next part, but there are definitely efforts underway to tackle the problems coal creates. One promising technology is carbon capture and storage, or CCS. It could potentially capture up to 90% of the CO2 emissions from coal plants.
That sounds pretty good. 90%.
Yeah, it's impressive.
So is CCS the answer to making coal a cleaner energy source?
Well, it has potential, but it's complicated. It's expensive to implement, and we're still figuring out how to scale it up. It's not a magic bullet, but it's a step in the right direction.
Okay, I see. So CCS is a maybe. Are there any countries out there that have successfully reduced their reliance on coal? Places we could look to as examples.
Germany and the UK have made some good progress. Germany's Energiewende policy, which basically means energy transition, is a really comprehensive approach. They're phasing out nuclear power and coal while promoting renewable energy through government subsidies and market-based incentives.
So it can be done. It seems like it takes political will, planning, and investment in the right technologies. But the big question is, what's next for coal? Can it really be a part of a sustainable future, considering everything we've talked about?
That's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. We'll take a closer look at the future of coal in a world that's striving for net zero emissions. And we'll talk about the challenges and opportunities of the global energy transition.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Welcome back. It seems like we just started to uncover this coal dilemma.
Yeah, we definitely dug up some dirt on coal's environmental impact and how it all ties into the global economy.
For sure.
But hey, it wasn't all bad news, right? Didn't we talk about some potential solutions?
We did. Remember those things we called mitigation efforts?
Uh-huh.
Let's dig a little deeper into those, especially carbon capture and storage. CCS for short.
Yeah, that one sounded promising.
Capturing almost 90% of those CO2 emissions coming from coal plants.
It did, but if I'm remembering right, it comes with a pretty hefty price tag, doesn't it?
You're right. Current estimates put it somewhere between $60 and $120 per ton of CO2 captured.
Yikes. That's a serious investment.
It is.
Makes you wonder if it could actually be used on a large scale.
Right. Could it really make a noticeable difference in those emissions from coal?
Well, are there any countries leading the way with this, showing us that it's possible?
There are some. Germany, for example, has been pretty vocal about phasing out coal.
Yeah, they seem to be ahead of the curve on all this energy transition stuff.
They are. Their Energiewende policy, which means energy transition, is a great example of a complete approach.
So they're not just talking the talk, they're actually doing it.
Absolutely.
Phasing out both nuclear power and coal, and they're really pushing for those renewables.
Yeah, lots of government subsidies and market mechanisms in place.
So it's not just a pipe dream, it's actually happening.
Right.
And it's not just them. Isn't the UK making progress too?
They are, showing that it's doable even in those developed countries that have always relied so much on coal.
This brings up a good point. If we're really serious about moving away from coal, what's next? What are the alternatives that could take its place?
The most obvious ones are those renewable energy sources.
Yeah.
Solar, wind, hydro, they come to mind immediately.
Ah, yes. The clean energy dream team.
Right.
I remember we talked about their reliability, right? Like what happens when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing?
That's where all those new technologies come in. Things like battery storage.
So those huge batteries we hear about, storing up all that energy from the sun and wind and then releasing it when we need it.
You got it.
Wow.
And battery technology is getting better and better, more efficient and cheaper.
That's amazing.
Really tackling that whole on-again, off-again problem with renewables.
So like imagine these giant batteries acting as backup generators.
Yes, smoothing out the supply and demand of energy from those renewable sources.
That's a pretty cool image.
It is. And there's more. Even smarter grids are being developed.
Grids?
Yeah, they can figure out the best way to distribute energy, mix and match those different sources, and adapt to any changes in supply and demand.
Sounds like a lot of juggling.
It is, but super important.
To keep everything running smoothly.
But here's the thing. Technology alone won't cut it.
What else do we need?
The right policies and enough investment to really make those cleaner alternatives thrive.
So governments and businesses gotta step up.
Exactly. Offering incentives to develop renewable energy, carbon pricing mechanisms that show the real cost of using fossil fuels, and investing in research and development.
It takes everyone working together.
It does, but there's one more thing we can't forget.
Oh, I know this one. It's all about us, the consumers, right?
You nailed it.
What we choose really matters.
Absolutely. Those big policy changes and fancy technologies are super important, but all those little things we do add up.
Like what kinds of things?
Switching to more efficient appliances, driving less and taking public transit or biking more, and supporting those companies that care about sustainability.
Every little bit helps.
Exactly. It's all of us working together, from those global policies to our everyday choices that'll really change the future of energy.
It's pretty awesome to think that we can all be part of something so big, you know.
Right. Shaping a more sustainable future.
Taking control of our energy, literally.
Exactly.
Making clean energy the standard, not some special thing.
Now, that's a future I can get behind.
So we've talked about all the problems with coal, explored some solutions, and really highlighted how tricky this energy transition is.
It is complex.
But where do we go from here? What happens to coal in a world that's all about sustainability?
That's the million-dollar question. Predicting the future is always tough, especially with something as important as energy.
Yeah, true.
But one thing's pretty clear. The world is moving towards a cleaner and more sustainable energy future.
It feels like there's no going back.
Yeah, the momentum is building, people are waking up to the climate crisis, and they know we need to act fast.
So even though coal is still a big part of the global energy mix right now, it probably won't be for much longer.
Most experts think so. They predict that the demand for coal will drop as those renewables get cheaper and easier to access.
Makes sense.
And as those environmental regulations get tougher around the world, it's going to be harder and harder for coal to compete.
So are we basically watching the end of coal?
It's a possibility, but these energy transitions are complicated, and they usually take a while.
Yeah.
Coal might still be useful in some places, especially where there aren't many other options.
Right.
But even then, its role will probably shrink, and they'll have to do it responsibly, with things like those carbon capture technologies we talked about.
So coal's future is kind of up in the air.
It is.
But it definitely seems like we need to keep pushing for a cleaner, more sustainable energy future.
No doubt about it. That's where the real work begins.
It's not just about replacing coal.
Yeah.
It's about changing how we think about energy altogether.
Exactly. Investing in renewables, using energy more efficiently everywhere, and developing those new technologies to meet our needs without messing up the planet.
This brings us to a really important question. What does all of this mean for our listeners?
Right. How does all this information about coal, the energy transition, and new technologies actually translate into action? What can they do to be a part of this energy revolution?
What can they do to make a difference?
Lots of things, big and small. They can support those policies that promote renewable energy and energy efficiency. They can make changes in their own lives to shrink their carbon footprint, driving less, using less energy at home, choosing products from companies that are trying to be sustainable.
Those everyday choices add up.
They do. And they can also be advocates for change in their communities, spreading the word and encouraging others to join the movement.
It's encouraging to realize that we're not just watching this happen. We can actually do something about it.
Exactly.
It's not about being overwhelmed by the size of the problem. It's about finding our own ways to help.
Exactly. And when enough people make those choices, it creates a ripple effect that can lead to big changes.
It's amazing to think that we can all be part of something bigger than ourselves, working together for a more sustainable future.
It's a powerful thing.
Taking back control of our energy, literally, and building a world where clean energy is the norm.
That's a great message to end on.
So as we wrap up this part of our coal deep dive, we want to leave you with this. The future isn't set in stone.
It's true.
We get to decide what it looks like.
The choices we made today will create the world we live in tomorrow.
What kind of energy legacy do you want to leave behind?
That's a good question to think about.
We've explored all the details, the challenges, the possibilities.
We have.
Now it's your turn to figure out your role in shaping the future of energy.
We hope this deep dive has given you the knowledge and inspiration to make informed decisions and be a force for change.
Absolutely.
Remember, the power is in your hands.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our coal deep dive. We've talked about the problems with coal and all the challenges of moving away from it. But now, let's focus on the solutions. What does a sustainable energy future actually look like? And how do we get there?
Well, it's kind of like we're at a crossroads, right?
Yeah, a chance to choose a different path.
Exactly. The decisions we make now will shape the future of energy.
So what are those decisions? What are the most promising solutions?
Renewable energy has to be a big part of it.
Of course.
Solar, wind, hydro, geothermal.
All the good stuff.
They're abundant, clean, and becoming more and more affordable.
But we talked about how they're not always reliable, right? The sun isn't always shining and the wind isn't always blowing. How do we deal with that?
That's where technology comes in. Battery storage is getting better all the time. More efficient, cheaper.
So we can store up all that extra energy when the sun's out or the wind's strong?
And use it when we need it.
Like giant backup batteries for the whole grid.
Yeah, exactly. And there's more. Hydrogen fuel cells, advanced nuclear reactors, even energy from tides and waves. There are tons of possibilities.
Wow, it's like a whole new world of energy. But technology isn't enough on its own, is it? We need the right infrastructure, too.
Absolutely. We need smarter grids that can handle all these different sources of energy and distribute it efficiently.
And that takes investment, right?
Yes, from both governments and businesses. Governments need to create policies that encourage renewable energy and make it harder to pollute. Businesses need to invest in clean technologies and make their operations more sustainable.
It's a team effort.
But even beyond technology and infrastructure, we need a new way of thinking about energy.
What do you mean?
We need to move away from that old centralized model where we rely on a few huge power plants. We need to create a more decentralized system.
So instead of those big power plants, we'd have lots of smaller, local energy sources.
Exactly. Imagine rooftop solar panels, wind farms in communities, even microgrids that can work independently.
It's like giving power back to the people.
That's a good way to put it. It makes us more resilient, less reliant on other countries for energy, and more self-sufficient.
It sounds amazing, this vision of a clean, sustainable energy future, but can we actually make it happen?
It's a big challenge, no doubt about it. But I think we can do it. We have the technology, the resources, and more people are realizing how urgent this is.
What makes you so optimistic?
There's so much momentum now. People are demanding clean energy. Businesses are seeing that sustainability is good for their bottom line. Governments are starting to implement the right policies. It feels like we're getting closer to a tipping point where this transition becomes unstoppable.
That's exciting.
It is, but it's not going to happen overnight. It requires a consistent effort, collaboration, and a willingness to change the way we do things.
So it's not about waiting for someone else to fix it. It's about taking action ourselves.
Exactly. Everyone has a role to play. We can all make a difference. By reducing our own energy use, supporting businesses that are doing the right thing, speaking up for clean energy policies, all those actions add up.
It's inspiring to think that we can be part of this change, that we can create a world where clean energy is the norm.
And that brings us back to you, our listeners. What will your energy legacy be?
We've explored the issues, the challenges, and the possibilities. Now it's up to you to decide how you want to be a part of this energy revolution.
We hope this deep dive has given you the information and the inspiration you need to make informed decisions and be a force for positive change. Remember, you have the power to make a difference.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep diving deep.